Let me just double-check this with our system if that's all right. The business class passenger leaned across the aisle, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone accustomed to being heard. She gestured toward the laptop bag tucked beneath the seat ahead. I'm pretty sure there's been some kind of mix-up here. The hum of the aircraft's ventilation system seemed to pause. Passengers in nearby seats turned their heads incrementally, the way people do when they sense tension building but haven't yet committed to watching. The woman in 4B adjusted her designer glasses and smoothed her already perfect blonde hair back from her forehead. Ma'am, I've shown you my boarding pass twice, Octavia said, her voice steady as bedrock. She kept her eyes on the safety card in her hands, though she'd read it completely 3 times already. The card's edges had begun to soften under her fingertips. Right, but you understand how these systems can glitch sometimes. The passenger's laugh carried no humor. Especially with last-minute bookings, I'd hate for there to be any embarrassment when the flight attendant sorts this out. The laptop bag shifted as the aircraft taxied. Through the small gap between seats, a federal court docket was visible on the screen, tomorrow's calendar blocked in red, case names and times marching down in military precision. The cursor blinked next to opening arguments, 9:00 a.m. EST. But the passenger couldn't see that screen. I think we both know what's happening here, Octavia said quietly. I'm not sure what you're implying, Morrison replied, but her voice had shifted pitch slightly. This is just standard procedure. Airlines make mistakes all the time. Do they? Octavia's tone carried 20 years of cross-examining witnesses who thought clever word choice could obscure intent. And how exactly did you determine that my seat assignment was a mistake? Morrison's fingers drummed against her armrest. Look, I fly this route monthly for business. I know how the upgrade system works. Sometimes people get moved up who shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be there, Octavia repeated. Based on what criteria? 40 minutes earlier, Octavia had been reviewing deposition transcripts in the terminal, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she highlighted inconsistencies in witness testimony. The case had consumed her thoughts for months, corporate negligence that had cost 3 families everything they had. She'd built her career on cases like this, the ones where powerful institutions believed they could simply outlast the people they'd wronged. It was her weakness, perhaps, this inability to let injustice slide by unopposed. Her ex-husband had called it stubborn pride. Her daughter called it the reason she was proud of her mother. The boarding announcement had interrupted her concentration, but she'd been grateful for first class on this route. The extra space would let her prepare properly for what might be the most important opening statement of her career. She'd earned this seat, just like she'd earned everything else through 20-hour days and a relentless refusal to accept second best. Now she watched the passenger's face harden as politeness gave way to something uglier. Look, I don't want to make a scene, but I've been flying with this airline for 15 years, platinum status. I know how this works. And how exactly does this work? Octavia's voice carried the same precision she used in cross-examination. The passenger's eyes darted to the aisle, clearly hoping a flight attendant would materialize to handle this situation. When none appeared, she lowered her voice to what she probably thought was a reasonable tone. These upgrades don't always stick, if you know what I mean, especially when the system gets overwhelmed with certain types of bookings. Certain types, Octavia said. Please be specific about what types you mean. Morrison's face flushed. I mean last-minute changes, standby situations, that sort of thing, nothing personal, obviously. Obviously, Octavia agreed. And you determined my booking was last-minute. How exactly? Travel blogger 3 rows back had been live-streaming his pre-flight routine when the conversation started. Derek Chen specialized in airline reviews and airport lounges, his audience of frequent flyers hanging on every detail about seat comfort and meal service. But this wasn't about overhead bin space or legroom anymore. His viewer count was small, maybe 60 people watching his usual content about business class amenities. Something in the passenger's tone made him adjust his phone's angle slightly. What exactly are you suggesting? Octavia asked. Her voice remained level, but passengers in nearby seats began to pay closer attention. The businessman in 4A looked up from his phone. The woman across the aisle paused her crossword puzzle. I'm suggesting that maybe you should just verify everything with the gate agent, the passenger said, before we take off, while there's still time to sort out any confusion. There is no confusion, Octavia said. I purchased this seat 3 weeks ago. I have a confirmation number. I checked in online 24 hours ago. What exactly would you like me to verify? Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Well, I mean, sometimes these discount booking sites can be fraudulent. The airline has to protect itself from that kind of thing. Discount booking sites? Octavia's voice carried a dangerous quiet. You're assuming I used a discount site because... The blogger's phone captured every word. His viewer count began to climb 75, then 85. The comment section started to fill with viewers trying to understand what they were witnessing. A gray-haired man in 4C cleared his throat. She's right, better to handle these things properly. He folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. The airline has procedures for a reason. What procedures? Octavia asked, turning to face him directly. What specific procedures require passengers to justify their seat assignments to other passengers? The man faltered, well, I just meant, if there's a question about legitimacy. Legitimacy, Octavia repeated. And what makes you question the legitimacy of my ticket? The aircraft's engines shifted pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, came the announcement over the intercom. We're fourth in line for departure. Flight time to Chicago will be approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes today. The passenger's smile returned, sharper now. See, still time to get this sorted out properly. She reached across to press the call button above Octavia's seat. No harm in double-checking. Actually, there is harm, Octavia said. There's harm in creating a situation where paying customers are subjected to additional scrutiny based on assumptions that have nothing to do with their actual documentation. Morrison's hand paused above the call button. I never said anything about, this isn't about. About what? Octavia's voice carried the full weight of judicial authority now. Please finish your thought. The laptop screen went dark as power-saving mode activated. The court docket disappeared behind a black screen that reflected the cabin lights like still water. Tomorrow's opening arguments were 18 hours away. The plaintiffs were counting on her. 3 families who'd lost their homes, their savings, their faith in the system that was supposed to protect them. Derek's viewer count hit 150. The comments were moving faster now, viewers asking what was happening, why the woman was being harassed, whether someone should call the airline. A few comments used words he quickly deleted, but the pattern was becoming clear to anyone paying attention. A flight attendant appeared from the galley, her professional smile already in place. She was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of eager-to-help energy that suggested she was relatively new to the job. Her name tag read Jennifer. How can I help you folks today? Jennifer asked, glancing between the passenger and Octavia. Thank you so much, the passenger said, her voice warm with relief. I think there might be a small issue with the seating assignments in this row. Could you just verify everything is correct? Jennifer looked confused. Is there a problem with your seats? Are you uncomfortable? No, Morrison said quickly. I just want to make sure there hasn't been any kind of booking error for everyone's sake. Everyone's sake? Octavia repeated. Jennifer, I'm curious, what's the airline's standard procedure when one passenger demands verification of another passenger's ticket? Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you saying there's a dispute about the seating assignments? I'm asking what protocol requires me to prove my seat assignment to another passenger, Octavia clarified. There isn't one, Jennifer said slowly. Passengers aren't required to verify their bookings to other passengers. Morrison jumped in, but surely you can just confirm that everything is legitimate. These fraudulent bookings are becoming more common. Jennifer's expression shifted. Her training probably covered this scenario, but the theoretical and the practical were proving to be different things. Ma'am, do you have a specific concern about fraud, because that would need to be reported to? Not fraud exactly, Morrison backtracked, just irregularities, system glitches, that sort of thing. What irregularities have you observed? Jennifer asked, consulting her tablet. Morrison struggled to find words. When you see something that doesn't look right. What doesn't look right about my boarding pass? Octavia interjected. Let me just verify with the gate agent, Jennifer said. Derek's viewer count hit 200. The comment section was exploding with outrage, viewers demanding to know why this woman was being questioned when she'd already shown her boarding pass twice. "That won't be necessary," Octavia said quietly. She looked directly at Jennifer. "But I am curious about something. What's the airline's policy regarding passenger harassment based on assumed payment status?" Jennifer's professional smile vanished entirely. What do you mean?" "I mean, when a passenger demands that another passenger's legitimately purchased seat be verified multiple times, what's the company's position on that behavior?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jennifer looked between Octavia and Morrison, clearly recognizing that she was suddenly in much deeper water than a simple seating dispute. Morrison's face had gone pale, as if she was beginning to realize that her assumptions about how this conversation would go might have been wrong. "I think I should get the captain," Jennifer said quietly. "That seems wise," Octavia agreed. Captain Rodriguez was reviewing the departure checklist when his phone buzzed with a text from the gate agent. "Passenger situation in 4A may need assistance." He'd been flying for 15 years, and passenger situations usually meant drunk travelers, medical emergencies, or the occasional panic attack. But they were still at the gate, which meant this was probably something else entirely. He made his way down the aisle, his uniform and authority clearing a path through the curious passengers. Jennifer looked relieved to see him, though the passenger in 4B, Morrison, seemed less enthusiastic about the escalation. "What seems to be the issue here?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone trained to handle emergencies at 35,000 feet. Morrison jumped in before anyone else could speak. "Captain, I've been trying to resolve a seating confusion. I think there might have been an error with the upgrade system." "What kind of error?" Rodriguez asked, looking at Jennifer. "Ma'am, could you explain the specific nature of the error you've identified?" Jennifer said, clearly hoping Morrison would clarify her concerns. Morrison looked trapped. "I just think there should be some verification of the booking process for security purposes." "Security purposes," Rodriguez repeated. "Are you suggesting there's a security threat?" "Not a threat exactly, more like fraudulent activity." Rodriguez looked at his tablet. "These are both confirmed and valid," he said. "I'm not seeing any issue." "But shouldn't we verify the payment method?" Morrison pressed. "I mean, for security purposes, these fraudulent bookings are becoming more common." "More common how?" Rodriguez asked. "Do you have specific information about booking fraud on this flight?" Morrison was floundering. "I just meant in general as a policy." "Our policy is to verify boarding passes at the gate, which was done," Rodriguez said. "Are you suggesting our gate agents made an error?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes things slip through." "What things?" Rodriguez's tone was becoming sharper. The word fraudulent had already landed like a physical blow. Derek's viewer count spiked to 300, then 400. The comment section was moving too fast to read now, but the anger was palpable even in the scrolling text. Rodriguez's expression shifted. In 15 years of flying, he developed an instinct for reading people, the nervous first-time flyers, the frequent travelers, the passengers who might cause problems. But he'd also learned to recognize the moments when his assumptions might be wrong, and something about Morrison's insistence was setting off alarm bells. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said carefully, "could you explain why you believe there might be fraud involved?" Morrison's confidence faltered. I mean, it's not about, I'm just saying that sometimes the system." Rodriguez's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw a text from his operations manager, "Need to call you ASAP about important." "Excuse me for just one moment," Rodriguez said, stepping back toward the galley to take the call. The brief phone conversation was terse and one-sided. Rodriguez listened, asked 2 short questions, and hung up with a grim expression. When he returned to the cabin, his demeanor had changed completely. "Mrs. Morrison," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying new authority. "I've just been informed about the nature of your concerns. I need to ask you directly, are you questioning this passenger's right to this seat based on her appearance?" Morrison's face went white. "I never said anything about appearance." "Then what exactly are you basing your fraud concerns on?" The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison looked around desperately, but the passengers who had initially seemed sympathetic were now studying their phones, their magazines, anything that would help them avoid eye contact. Derek's live stream was approaching 500 viewers. Major airline industry accounts were starting to retweet clips of the confrontation. The hashtag #Seatgate was beginning to trend in aviation circles. Rodriguez looked directly at Octavia and his voice carried a new note of respect. "Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. I've just been informed that you're Judge Octavia Williams of the Federal District Court." The words landed like thunderclaps. Morrison's face went white. Jennifer took a step backward. The businessman in 4A made a small choking sound. "The same Judge Williams who's presiding over the Meridian Industries case," Rodriguez continued. "The trial that starts tomorrow morning." Derek's viewer count exploded past 1,000. The comments section was chaos now, viewers sharing the clip, tagging news outlets demanding accountability. The story was breaking containment, spreading beyond aviation enthusiasts to anyone interested in justice. Octavia finally spoke, her voice carrying 20 years of judicial authority. "Captain Rodriguez, I purchased this ticket with my own funds for legitimate travel to fulfill my judicial obligations. I've presented valid documentation twice. I'm curious what additional verification Mrs. Morrison believes is necessary." Morrison was sinking into her seat as if trying to disappear entirely. The passengers who had supported her were now studying their phones, their magazines, anything that would help them avoid eye contact. "None whatsoever, Your Honor," Rodriguez said firmly, "and I want to personally ensure that the rest of your flight is comfortable and without incident." "Captain," Morrison said weakly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never meant to suggest." "What did you mean to suggest?" Octavia asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent the last 20 minutes insisting that my legitimately purchased seat assignment requires additional verification that no other passenger on this aircraft has been asked to provide." Morrison had no response. The silence that followed was profound. Not the comfortable quiet of a cabin preparing for takeoff, but the heavy silence of people realizing they'd witnessed something that would have consequences far beyond this aircraft. Octavia stood and gathered her belongings with the same methodical precision she used in court. "I'll be moving to the seat I reserved," she said quietly. "Mrs. Morrison, I hope you have a pleasant flight." She walked past Morrison without another glance, past Jennifer who stammered an apology, past the passengers who suddenly found their armrests fascinating. Derek's phone followed her progress, his viewer count now approaching 2,000 as the clip was shared across social media platforms. At the front of the aircraft, an airline executive was waiting by the door. Richard Chen, the regional operations manager, looked like a man who just watched his career flash before his eyes. "Judge Williams, on behalf of the entire airline, I want to apologize for what just occurred." "Mr. Chen," Octavia said, consulting his name tag, "I assume you have protocols for addressing passenger harassment." "Yes, ma'am, we absolutely do. I can assure you that this incident will be thoroughly investigated." "What does your investigation protocol entail?" Octavia asked. Chen swallowed hard. "Full review of the incident, interviews with all involved parties, assessment of policy compliance, and appropriate disciplinary action where warranted." "And what's your timeline for this investigation?" 48 to 72 hours for initial findings, Your Honor." "Good, I trust you'll follow them." She moved past him toward the jet bridge, leaving Chen to contemplate the full scope of what had just transpired. A federal judge had been publicly profiled and harassed by passengers on his airline. The entire incident had been live-streamed, and in 18 hours, that same judge would be presiding over a case involving corporate accountability and institutional bias. In the black SUV waiting outside the terminal, Octavia's clerk called with an update on tomorrow's docket. "The Meridian Industries attorneys want to discuss a last-minute settlement offer," he said. "Not tonight, David," Octavia replied. "We'll handle everything in court tomorrow as scheduled." "Are you sure? They seem unusually eager to resolve this before trial." "I'm sure. What's our status on the media credential requests?" 17 news outlets have requested access, more than usual for a corporate negligence case. Grant them full transparency." She hung up and watched the airport recede through the tinted windows. In 18 hours, she would put on her robes and preside over a case about institutional failure and the assumption that some people belonged in certain spaces while others did not. But right now, she was simply a woman who'd bought a plane ticket and been told she didn't belong. At 30,000 feet above Chicago, Derek Chen was still live-streaming to an audience that had grown to 5,000 viewers. The comments were a torrent of outrage, support, and demands for accountability. Media outlets were reaching out through his direct messages. The story was becoming something larger than a seat dispute. In the corporate boardroom of the airline's headquarters, executives were conducting an emergency damage control session. "How many people saw the live stream?" asked the chief marketing officer. "Current estimates are around 50,000 unique viewers across all platforms," the crisis communications director replied. "The clip is going viral. Seatgate is trending nationally." "What's our exposure with Judge Williams specifically?" "She's presiding over the Meridian case starting tomorrow, multi-billion-dollar litigation. And our legal counsel advises that this incident could potentially be seen as institutional bias, given our response protocols." The CEO rubbed his temples. "What are our options?" "We terminate Morrison immediately, we issue a public apology, we implement mandatory bias training company-wide, and we pray that Judge Williams doesn't view this as evidence of systemic discrimination." "Do it, all of it. What about our policy review?" "Legal recommends a complete overhaul of passenger dispute protocols. We need clear guidelines about what constitutes legitimate verification requests versus harassment." "How long will that take?" 6 months for full implementation, but we can have interim policies in place within 2 weeks. Make it 1 week. Meanwhile, in a federal courthouse in Chicago, security guards were reviewing tomorrow's docket and noting the increased media attention around the Meridian Industries case. News vans were already setting up outside, though they weren't yet aware of the connection between tonight's viral incident and tomorrow's proceedings. At NBC Chicago, assignment editor Lisa Park was watching the social media feeds when she spotted the connection. "Wait," she said to her producer, "the judge in that viral airplane video, she's the same judge presiding over the Meridian trial tomorrow. The discrimination case, the one with the $3 billion settlement talks. That's the one. Judge Octavia Williams, 20 years on the federal bench, known for not tolerating nonsense from either side. Get a crew to the courthouse, this just became a much bigger story. Already on it, and I want background on Williams' judicial record, if she's been dealing with discrimination cases. Way ahead of you, turns out she's written some pretty significant opinions on institutional bias." By morning, the incident had been covered by every major news outlet. The live stream had been viewed over 2 million times. Morrison had been terminated from her consulting job after her company was identified through social media. Jennifer had been reassigned pending an investigation. Judge Williams arrived at the courthouse at 7:30 a.m., 90 minutes before the Meridian Industries hearing was scheduled to begin. She moved through the media gauntlet without comment, her bailiff clearing a path to her chambers. At 8:45, she emerged in her robes and took the bench. The courtroom was packed with media, attorneys, and members of the public who'd been following the story. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying the same quiet authority it had carried on the airplane. "Before we begin today's proceedings, I want to address the incident that occurred yesterday evening on my flight to Chicago." The courtroom fell silent. Camera clicks were the only sound as photographers captured the moment. What happened yesterday was a reminder that assumptions about who belongs where are still very much alive in our society. But this courtroom is not an airplane cabin. Here, we deal in facts, evidence, and law. The personal experiences of any individual, including this court, do not override the principles of justice that govern these proceedings. She looked directly at the Meridian Industries legal team. "Having said that, I want to be very clear. If anyone in this courtroom believes that yesterday's incident has compromised this court's ability to be fair and impartial, you may file the appropriate motions. But if you choose to proceed, you will be held to the same standards of evidence and legal argument that have always governed this court." The Meridian attorneys exchanged glances. Their lead counsel stood slowly. Your Honor, Meridian Industries would like to formally apologize for any connection between our corporate practices and the broader cultural issues highlighted by yesterday's incident. We have no motions to file at this time. Very well, let's proceed. The trial proceeded with the methodical precision that had characterized Judge Williams' career. No special attention was paid to the cameras. No accommodation was made for the viral nature of the case's new prominence. Justice, she'd learned long ago, was not a performance. 6 months later, Derek Chen published a book about the incident and its aftermath. The livestream had fundamentally changed his life, transforming him from a travel blogger to a documentary filmmaker. His followers had grown to 500,000, but more importantly, he'd helped spark a conversation about everyday discrimination that had led to policy changes across multiple industries. Morrison had moved to another state and taken a job that kept her away from public-facing roles. She'd never publicly commented on the incident, though her LinkedIn profile had been quietly updated to remove several previous positions. Judge Williams was on another flight reviewing case files for the following week's docket. The flight attendant, a young black woman named Aisha, offered her a warm towel with a genuine smile. "Thank you," the judge said quietly. "Thank you, Your Honor," Aisha replied, equally quietly, "for showing us that dignity doesn't require permission." The moment passed without fanfare, the way most progress does, quietly, person by person, choice by choice. Because courage, it turns out, isn't about grand gestures or viral moments. It's about refusing to accept that some people belong while others must prove they deserve to be there. And sometimes, the most radical act of all is simply insisting on your right to exist in the space you've rightfully claimed. If this story moved you, consider how often we witness these moments of casual discrimination and choose silence instead of action. Subscribe to see more stories that matter, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that their dignity is not up for debate. Because until we all belong everywhere, none of us truly belong anywhere. The seat was never the point, it never is.